So yesterday, Caroline Glick on the Jerusalem Post wrote an article, and it's titled "Why Israel Let Hamas Win." I want to read it, and I want to provide even further thought into this and explain really, why Israel is losing this war against its enemies. And it goes, Caroline Glick is correct, but it goes deeper than what she is saying. I will go ahead and read her article, and I'm telling you, she's on point. She knows what she's talking about. Okay. So, Israel's Security Cabinet decision Tuesday afternoon to walk away from the war Hamas initiated Monday and to accept a ceasefire is frustrating and infuriating. Hamas shot nearly 500 projectiles into Israel in 24 hours. It blew up a bus with a Cornet anti-tank missile. 60 Israelis were wounded, several critically. One civilian was killed. Numerous homes were destroyed. Israel has never experienced any rocket onslaught from Gaza remotely as intense as what Hamas and Islamic Jihad shot off on Monday and Tuesday. And yet, rather than respond with equal, or better yet, far greater force and teach Hamas and Islamic Jihad a lesson they would remember, the Security Cabinet sufficed with a couple hundred pinpoint air attacks and then accepted the IDF's advice and opted for a ceasefire. In so doing, they left the residents of southern Israel virtually hostages of Hamas and Islamic Jihad, who have retained the capacity to attack them at will. Defense Minister Avigdor Lieberman suddenly resigned on Wednesday, may help his little party, Israel Betanu, get reelected to Knesset in next elections. But if it does, then Lieberman will have won his political survival at Israel's expense. Hamas is entirely justified in presenting Lieberman's resignation as proof that it defeated Israel this week. Winners don't quit, losers do. But beyond being frustrating and infuriating, the cabinet's decision is cause for deep concern. Why did the cabinet opt to stand down in the face of Hamas's unprecedented onslaught? Leaving concerns about the prospect of war in the north with Iran, Hezbollah, and Syria out of the picture for a moment, there are, on the face of things, two basic explanations for the cabinet's decision. First, maybe the WhatsApp joke making the rounds are right. Maybe Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and his ministers are a bunch of stupid chickens. Lieberman effectively accused them of stupidity and cowardice at his press conference Tuesday afternoon when he announced his resignation, but there's no evidence that Netanyahu is stupid. To the contrary, as for fear, there is ample evidence that if he and his ministers were fearful, they have good reason to be deeply worried. This brings us to the second and more realistic reason to view the cabinet's decision to stand down in the face of Hamas's aggression as a bright red warning light. The source of that concern is the IDF's general staff. Israel does not seek to overthrow the Hamas regime in Gaza, and for good reason. The price of a war to overthrow Hamas will be exorbitant, both in terms of the human and monetary cost of war, and the return would be dubious at best. Israel doesn't have an army big enough to spare 3 divisions to control a post-Hamas Gaza. The other option, often touted by the left, is that Israel pay the price of overthrowing Hamas and then hand Gaza back over to the PLO. The PLO, though, is no less hostile than Hamas. Israel has no interest whatsoever in empowering the PLO by giving it Gaza. Given the absence of a better alternative to Hamas in Gaza, rather than work to overthrow the terror regime, Israel has focused its efforts on keeping Hamas as weak as possible. And so, since Hamas took over Gaza in 2007, Israel's effective strategy for dealing with the terror regime can be equal to mowing the grass. Every time Hamas becomes too powerful, Israel finds itself in another round of war with it. The purpose of Israel's operations is to cut Hamas down to size and walk away until the next round of war. But this week, Hamas made it clear that Israel needs to mow it down. A terror regime capable of sending 500 projectiles into Israeli territory in less than 24 hours and destroying a bus with an anti-tank missile is a terror regime that has become too powerful. So why didn't the cabinet order the IDF to mow the grass in Gaza? Why didn't our leaders order the IDF to kill Hamas commanders, Yahya Sinwar and Ismail Haniyeh? Why didn't they order the IDF to destroy the rocket launchers, the crews that operate them? Why didn't they order the IDF to destroy Hamas's bases and missile depots? There are two possible explanations for this decision not to give these orders. Taken separately and together, they point to an acute problem with the IDF senior ranks require immediate attention. One explanation has been highlighted by retired senior IDF commanders and Yediot Aeronauts military commentator Yossi Yehoshua. And the fact that Yossi Yehoshua's surname is the name of the Messiah is not lost on me. I will continue. This explanation argues that the cabinet decision to stand down on Tuesday owed to the general staff refusal to take the action necessary to cut Hamas down to size. The general staff refusal, they say, stems from the role lawyers are now playing in the IDF's targeting decision. Since Operation Cast led in 2008 through 2009, military lawyers have been attached to fighting units down to the battalion level. These attorneys are allegedly prohibiting required action by claiming that strategically significant and operational vital actions like killing Hamas commanders and bombing rocket launching units constitute war crimes. Who came up with this? And where did this idea come from? Caroline Glick will continue, and she will show you where this came from, which is why after I read her post, I will dig some little bit deeper. Chief of Staff Lieutenant General Gadi Eisenkot has demonstrated for years that he's willing to subordinate trigger pullers to attorneys who do not suffer the consequences of their lenient interpretations of the actions of Israel's enemies. He elevated military advocate General Sharon Afik to the rank of Major General. He supports indicting combat soldiers for alleged violent crimes on the basis of radical legal interpretations of actions in the battle. The message Eisenkot has been communicating to everyone from platoon leaders to division commanders is that they must subordinate their actions to the judgment of lawyers who have no command responsibilities. It is important to point out that the international law, international law, Romanish international law. Did you get that? It is important to point out that the international law being implemented by IDF commanders through military lawyers is not actually the law as written. So basically, Roman law has infected the Israeli military. You know, Rome, the one that destroyed Jerusalem in the first place. It is a radical ideological interpretation of general principles of international law. For instance, there is no explicit universally applied determination of what a proportionate response to aggression is. Everything is a judgment call. And the judgment is that the IDF has internalized through its lawyers is the one pronounced by anti-Semitic UN agencies. And antagonistic self-declared human rights organizations, namely that Israel is guilty until proven innocent. Needless to say, the IDF's internalization of this bigoted and deeply flawed interpretation of international law is causing grave damage to the IDF's ability to defend the country from aggression. The second equally troubling explanation for the cabinet's decision to stand down is that Netanyahu and his ministers don't trust the IDF's operational competence. Well, this is the reason why Romanish bigoted UN international law is being forced upon the military anyways, because the higher ups don't trust the IDF. You see. For 7 months, the IDF has failed to come up with ways to end Hamas's operation along the border. The special forces operating in Gaza on Sunday were ambushed. Their cover was blown, and the IDF permitted a bus carrying 50 soldiers to enter a border area where it was entirely exposed to enemy fire. If this is how the IDF handles Hamas, how will it handle Hezbollah, which is 10 times more powerful? I don't know. I don't have the time to read this whole thing here. I think I have covered enough. And if you want to go find the article, it's on carolineglick.com, Why Israel Let Hamas Win. You see what's going on, don't you? And then, of course, after the ceasefire, there was an uprising in the south. Israeli citizens started protesting outside IDF headquarters. Now, clearly, this comes from the infection of Romanish law now in Israel. The same infection that has spread to the United States. So let's look at the Roman Republic, how it started, and then you will be able to see why let me just go ahead and get started on that, and I will tell you my opinion. Wikipedia, the Roman Senate. The Roman Senate was a political institution in ancient Rome. It is one of the most in Roman history, being established in the first days in the city of Rome, traditionally founded in 753 BCE. It survived the overthrow of the kings in 509 BC, the fall of the Roman Republic in the first century BC, the division of the Roman Empire in 395 CE, the fall of the Western Roman Empire in 476 CE, and the barbarian rule of Rome in the 5th, 6th, and 7th centuries. Since that would be the Ostrogoths, whom the man at the Vatican, I think that's right, defeated. Anyway, I'll continue. During the days of the kingdom, it was little more than an advisory council to the king. The last king of Rome, Lucius Tarquinius Superbus, was overthrown following a coup d'etat led by Lucius Junius Brutus, who founded the Roman Republic. Notice something here, folks? There's a word here that's familiar to the folks in the United States: republic. You see, the United States government is patterned after the Roman Republic. Therefore, the United States government is Romanish. Now, I know that this might offend a lot of people, but you can go and study American law, and you will find that the Republican form of government, the representative Republican form of government of the United States of America, its founding is in Rome. And so are constitutional monarchies around in Europe. They're also founded in Rome. During the early days, the early republic, the Senate was politically weak, while the various executive magistrates were quite powerful. Since the transition from monarchy to constitutional rule, there we go with constitutional rule. Where did constitutional rule originate from, folks? Rome. Since the transition from monarchy to constitutional rule was most likely gradual, it took several generations before the Senate was able to assert itself over the executive magistrates. By the Middle Republic, the Senate had reached the apex of its Republican power. The late Republic saw a decline in the Senate's power, which began following the reforms of the tribunes, Tiberius and Gaius Gracchus. Let's see here. All right. After the transition of the Republic into a principate, the Senate lost much of its political power as well as its prestige. Following the constitutional reforms of the Emperor Diocletian, the Senate became politically irrelevant. When the seat of government was transferred out of Rome, the Senate was reduced to a purely municipal body. This decline in status was reinforced when the Emperor Constantine the Great created an additional Senate in Constantinople. So I think that's enough. That what I'm proving, folks, here is that a Republican form of government is based on Rome. Now, people will, now the other side always says, no, 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 this is not a republic. This is a democracy, which is foolish. But let's go look. Let's just see. Democracy, a system of government by the whole population or all the eligible members of a state, typically through elected representatives. That's a republic, folks. I might dig into it a little bit deeper, but it's basically, democracy is basically, here we go. The uncertainty of outcomes is inherent in democracies, which makes all forces struggle repeatedly for the realization of their interests, being the devolution of power from people or group to a set of rules. Western democracy, as distinct from that which existed in pre-modern societies, is generally considered to have originated in city-states such as classical Athens and the Roman Republic. There, that should suffice. Now, I'm here to tell you today that as you look around the world, including Israel, republics and democracies have failed. I'm announcing it to you today. Take a look around the world and you will see that republics and democracies have failed because they are Roman in nature. Now, in Israel, the Roman democracy republic, whatever you want to call it, has failed them. Why? Because inherently in republics and democracies are its number one cancer, its number one flaw is corruption. Now, the argument for the United States that Israel is its ally is it is the only democracy in the Middle East. Let's go find that. Wow. So I typed in Israel is the only, and Google goes and types in the rest for me, democracy in the Middle East. Can you believe that? Okay. Yet democracy is based upon Rome. Well, the democracy, the Romanish democracy in Israel has failed. And that is the reason why Israel is surrounded. That is the reason why Israel is in trouble, in big trouble, because of the democracy. And it's going to take a monarchy, that's right, to turn around the situation in Israel. It's going to take a king that does not recognize international law, a Messiah that rejects Roman law. And of course, you do know that when this son of David sits on his throne in Jerusalem, that the Western nations, the Western powers, the Western republics and democracies will reject him because the government is not Romanish in nature. It will no longer be a democracy. It will no longer be any sort of republic. And in all truth, folks, to the leaders in Israel, you need to stand up and tell the people why the government is a failure. You need to come out and say that they patterned this government in Israel after Rome, the oppressor. You need to come out and say it and then call for the Messiah to come so that you can have a king that rules uprightly and justly. All of the democracies and republics and constitutional monarchies of Europe will be overthrown, including in the United States, will be overthrown by the king that will be in Israel, who will rule by fiat or by the word of the Father, Jehovah the Father. Now, I hope this video has been helpful. You're going to find more and more now that I mean, you can look all over Europe. democracies have been a failure. At the very last, democracies and republics are going to cause overthrow of government, brother against brother, people killing each other. So I have rejected all forms of Romanish governments entirely myself. I do not participate in it. I just don't. Because the Romanish government is the oppressor of my people, my forefathers, and the Jews.